start with the story for this evening. This year's matrics are expected to do worse than usual. Education experts predict fewer distinctions and a much lower pass rate than last year. So to delve into the meat of the matter, we're joined now by Professor Mary Metcalfe, who's from the University of Johannesburg, and Alan Thompson, President of the National Teachers Union. Professor, let's start off with you this evening. Thanks a lot for joining us. I mean, it's predicted that 80% of the so-called progressed pupils, these are the ones that came in progress from grade 11 to matric for the year 2020, might fail this year's exams. Is that far-fetched, or really is it a big possibility?
Well, I don't like to make predictions. What we do know is that we can't compare this year with any other previous year, and it would be unfair to do so. That puts a huge challenge to the system, because indeed the matric results, the NEC results, have to be comparable. Learners who write this year, who may have lost as much as 20% of the time this year, need to be able to hold their heads up tall and say, my matric is worth the same as any other year. I may not have done as well as I might have done in another year, but the value of the matric is the same.
But on the other side of it, I mean, Prof, you're speaking here about the time spent, particularly during the schooling calendar in itself. And I mean, experts are saying that a quarter of the schooling calendar this year has been lost. So it's looking at exactly the pressure that lies on teachers to educate effectively, particularly as we lead up to the end of the year, but also the relying of pupils to actually be able to catch up to the content, especially the content that now must be grasped within a short space of time.
Well, the grade 12s have been back at school for longer than any other grade other than grade 7. But they still, it's been calculated in the CRAM study, have lost as much as 17% of the time. What becomes much more challenging for us as a society is the inequalities within that. Many matric learners have had lots of support and lots of access to online learning, and there's many other matric learners who have been battling without adequate resources at home, without adequate support. We know from the monitoring of WASA matrics that the NECT is undertaking that learners that are participating in the monitoring are reporting that they're trying really hard. They're working late at night. They now have access to the broadcast of the key subjects, and we hope that that will help them. But across the country, secondary schools are pulling out all stops to support the class of 2020.
Yeah, it does not only lie with the educators that are doing their best to pull out all the stops, doesn't it, Professor? Because on the other side of it, it lies with the confidence of the matriculants themselves. I mean, if a young person, I mean, we've all been through matric and we all understand the psychological effects and the psychological turmoil that one goes through just to get the pass mark right. So when you're looking at the confidence with which these matriculants are going to be entering into the examination, it cannot be compared to the year 2019, can it? And one wonders that if we're going to experience a lot of the young people dropping out, because that's saying somewhat about 10% of young people have already opted to drop out of matric, so the psychological preparedness for them to actually take this examination then comes into question.
Tandikile, that's a brilliant question, and I'm glad that you've made those points, because what we need to be communicating to all learners is that in this difficult time, they must not give up hope. Catch up, whether it's in primary school or secondary school, has to be seen as a catch-up over several years. Learners who feel that they have not had an opportunity for a fair chance need to approach the grade 12 exams doing their best, but knowing that there will be an opportunity to repeat subjects next year. We cannot have the whole class of 2020 feeling a sense of injustice and despair. We have to, at school and at home, support them to say, do your best, but it has been a difficult year and you will have another opportunity. And that also goes for the progressed learners. So calculating pass rates and distinction rates is not helpful at this point. It can't be the same as other years. All we can hope is that everybody, parents, community, schools, and learners themselves, get ready for a long haul, not only in preparing for the exams in November, but in subsequent processes of doing better if they feel they weren't able to perform at their best.
Yeah. Professor, please hang tight because I want to bring in Alan Thompson here from the National Teachers Union into this conversation. Alan, I'm hoping that you can hear us this evening. I mean, looking at the realities that are confronted by teachers on a daily basis, just to get the curriculum learned or even absorbed by young people, take us through some of the realities that are being confronted by teachers on a daily basis just to allow for this learning to take place.
Well, thank you very much for having me on behalf of the National Teachers Union. Well, as the National Teachers Union, we firstly want to wish the teachers tomorrow the best World Teachers Day. We know that they've tried everything possible in their power just to ensure that our education system does not collapse. Even under these difficult circumstances, teaching under COVID-19, they were able to lift the burden of the education system up, such that even those learners with no floor space, schools without the necessary infrastructure, teachers have done everything possible just to assist. Now, coming back to the question that you have posed, I want to indicate that in the Republic of South Africa, we have so many problems. The main problem is the gap between the poor and the rich. If you look at the schools that were seriously affected during the period of COVID-19, are the schools that are situated in township, are the rural schools. Simple because those schools every time are being overcrowded. If you check in terms of the employment of teachers in those schools, you find that the majority of the former Model C schools, the schools that are situated in cities, parents or the school governing bodies are able to employ additional teachers. But in the public sector, principals of schools, school governing bodies, they are unable to employ extra teachers. As a result, the quality of education, it differs, and it is very much compromised when you go to the township schools and when you go to the rural schools because of those factors like classes being overcrowded, shortage of suitably qualified teachers, and also issues of the infrastructure, no decent sanitation, no water, like it was the case when some of the schools could not even reopen, simply because there was no proper supply of water. But teachers have been able to keep the fires burning in such institutions. They've been producing distinctions. They've been producing good results. As a result, they try their level best to work on Saturday, they work on Sunday, they improvise, they make copies for the learners using their own money without being compensated by anyone. So looking at all those factors, it shows that there is a lot that has been done by the teachers just to try to make sure that even those that are coming from a poor background, they don't feel the pressure due to the sacrifices that are made by the teachers.
You know, Alan, just to echo what Professor Mary Metcalfe was saying earlier, as I was asking her the question about the psychological preparedness of young people, as you've listed those realities, and there's a reason why I asked you to list these realities, because given the realities that you've listed, would you say that young people, matriculants, are prepared enough? Are they ready to sit down for the final examinations? As you and I are doing an analysis on the 4th of October 2020, we're not even speaking about what's to come, but today, if we have to look at as matters stand, are young people ready to sit in for that matric final?
Well, the fact of the matter is that they cannot be as ready as those that wrote a matric examination last year. They cannot be as ready as those who also wrote matric in 2018, simply because of the circumstances they had to study under, and looking at the fact that they were unable to attend every day. Some they've been attending once after 2 weeks. Some they've been attending 4 days a week, even though others they had an advantage of the school environment that was able to accommodate all of them. So we can say right now, they are not necessarily ready, except that teachers are doing everything possible to prepare them to sort of have a positive effect on their psychological state of readiness. As a result, we are still positive that because the department has decided to shift the examination just to allow them additional 2 weeks to be able to be prepared, we are convinced that teachers will do everything possible, but the state of readiness will never be at where we want them to be, simply because of the effect of COVID-19. So I can say without fear of contradiction, learners are not really ready, but because there's nothing that can be done, they are compelled to go and sit for examination.
Alan, please stay on the line for me because I'm going to bring in Professor Mary Metcalfe. Professor, as you're hearing what the teachers' unions are actually saying regarding the state of readiness for young people to sit down for these final examinations, I don't want us to focus so much on the figures. I mean, looking at how they're expecting the pass rate to drop between 3 to 5%, but rather I want us to focus from a perspective of readiness. How do parents get young people ready in the midst of an inequality, in the midst of a pandemic? How do society, communities start galvanizing around these young people to ensure that at least they are given the best possible chance of doing somewhat well during these 2020 examinations?
I would say that first of all, people that are supporting matriculants of this year need to give them a sense of hope that it has been a hard year, but they will be able to recover if they don't do as well as they would hope. There will be opportunities. The second thing that they need to do is to encourage them to take advantage of the opportunities, such as there was a matrics streaming on TV of the key subjects as a preparation for writing. Thirdly, they need to support them in terms of providing an environment where it's possible for them to concentrate on studying in a routine. Now, this is easy, as Alan has pointed out, in our unequal society. If you have your own room, you have resources, you have a private space to study. In families where matrics are trying to study in a 2-room, 3-room, 4-room house with multiple family members, I think the whole family needs to come together to say, how can we create a space where we will support you to be able to study and concentrate, where we perhaps take some of the burden of the domestic chores off of you? How can we work with other members of the community to find a place where you can study together? And to understand that learners writing matric this year may need quite unusual time habits. I'm finding, again, from the NECT research on was a matrics, that many learners prefer to sleep in the early evening and get up late at night when the family is resting and in bed so that they are able to study uninterrupted. I think that is something that families can actively support in.
Thank you very much for that, Professor Mary Metcalfe. We'll leave it there from the University of Johannesburg, our education expert, and of course, Alan Thompson, President of the National Teachers Union, joining us for that conversation. I might say that a very sobering conversation there, Tembegile, as we're looking at young people sitting down for the matric.